you had to come up with this product idea for English C, and I didn't really know what to do, but then I realized that I'd started reading the Lord of the Rings trilogy in English earlier this year, and I thought that, hey, I could make something out of this. So I had read it in Swedish for many years ago, and I remember that, I only read the first book though. However, I remember that there was some kind of strong relationship between the fact that J.R.R. Tolkien, the author, that he was a professor of language that had a strong connection between with the sensation you had when you read the book, and also in the movies. It's a great production. So I thought that I'd investigate this further, the relationship between Tolkien as a professor in language and how this affected his works. And to know this, you have to understand how Tolkien's life was. He had a big love of language his whole life, so it started with his youth. He was interested in language, and it started early. His mother introduced him to Latin and French, and in middle school, that's when you're about like 10, 14 years old, he started studying all these languages: Anglo-Saxon, Welsh, Greek, Finnish, Icelandic, Spanish, and Ancient Norse. Ancient Norse is the language. It's Old Swedish and Norwegian, and it's the language that was at the time when we had the Asatru and so on. And also when he was young, he liked to play with words and invent languages of his own, which he later came to do more thoroughly. And in his adult life, he worked many years actually, as a professor of Anglo-Saxon language at Oxford University, and he has also worked as an editor for the Oxford English Dictionary. Working at a dictionary, you work a lot with etymology. Etymology is the science around words and the history and origin of words and languages. And when he learned so much about this etymology that he was able to create fully functional languages, such as the Elvish languages that appear in Lord of the Rings and his other works. And he created a lot of languages, and often the languages predated the stories about them, because he created the Elvish languages before he created Middle-earth and the stories about the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit and so on. Because Tolkien realized that somehow a language presupposes a mythology, and he stated in one of his in a letter to his publishers, he stated, "A primary fact about my work, that it is all of a piece, a fundamental linguistic inspiration. The inventage of language is the foundation. To me, a name comes first, and the story follows." So this is the way of this kind of thinking is what created the stories of Lord of the Rings. So, and the language he created most thoroughly, it was the Elven languages, and he based it on Welsh and Finnish actually. And this Elven languages, you've probably all heard it in the movies or read it. It's very beautiful and so on, and the beauty of this language, and he really liked the sound of it. And the sound of this language, the beauty and the fluency, created the Elven race that he has in the movies and so on. Tolkien meant that the Elvish language would be totally useless as a language if it didn't have a mythology that explains or justifies its existence. And he meant that in general of all languages, because all languages come out of society, development, and people, and so on. And this way of thinking was the origin of the stories and history of Middle-earth, the fictive world of Middle-earth of Lord of the Rings. So yeah, he created myths that harmonized with his invented languages. And he invented over 14 more or less fully functional languages. The Elvish languages were the most developed, and within the Elven languages there were 15 different dialects with all of their own individual grammar. He created the languages of men, which were different from each other. It was the languages that the hobbits and the men of Mordor, the men of Rohan and Gondor speak, and the language of the dwarves. He created Entish, the language of the powers. It doesn't occur in Lord of the Rings though. And he also created the language of the orcs of the First Age, and then of the orcs of the Third Age. And he created the Black Speech, which in Lord of the Rings, it's the language that Sauron, the evil Sauron, I guess you all know who he is, it's the language that he created for his people and his orcs and so on. Yeah, so you can see that he put a lot of effort in behind this whole world. So, and what else contributes to the special feeling you get when watching the movies or reading these books? Tolkien had great narrative techniques, and when reading the first book, it was kind of slow. It felt like the first half of the first book, it was all like descriptions about the world and the environments and everything. It was really slow, and it was talking about the history of the world and so on. However, this is what makes this world so authentic. He put so much effort in describing the details of every scene and setting and so on. And the second thing is that these works were written between 1937 and 1955, and also Tolkien studied Old, Middle, and Modern English, the history of English languages. And with this knowledge, his language is kind of old-fashioned. However, it's very beautiful, and it really appeals to me when reading, because it feels like reading nothing. It feels like something really unique compared to other books. And when you read the books, poems and songs appear within each story, and this gives like a fresh change when you're reading, to have a poem or a song. And when I read the songs or the poems, I kind of get notes in my head. So I decided to put music to a song that Gimli, the dwarf, he sings this when he's in Moria. The Moria is the dungeons of the dwarves, and it's a fallen society. It's filled with goblins and dwarves and a Balrog and so on. So I decided to put some chords to this and actually sing how this song went in my head when I read it. And it's actually just half the song. I don't want to kill all of you all day. So it goes something like this. Bye. The world was young, the mountains green, no stain yet on the moon was seen, no words laid on stream or song. When Durin walked and walked alone, he named the nameless hills and dells, he drank from yet untasted wells. He stopped and looked in Mirror Mare and saw a crown of stars appear as gems upon a silver thread, above the shadow of his head. The world was fair, the mountains tall, in elder days before the fall of mighty kings in Nargothrond throned, and Gondolin, who now beyond the western seas have passed away. The world was fair in Durin's day. A king he was on carven throne, in many pillared halls of stone, with golden roof and silver floor, and rooms upon the door. The light of sun and star and moon, and shining lamps of crystal hue, undimmed by cloud or shade of night, we shone forever far and bright. Yeah, something like that. And his way of writing the songs and poems really puts some kind of feeling in this books, and it emphasizes the feelings and impressions you get when reading the stories and the scenes and the settings in the books. And so to conclude this essay that I wrote about this was that, in my opinion, the geniality in Tolkien's works is based on how Middle-earth arose from mythology, how he created a whole world after creating languages, and it really says something about the authenticity about Middle-earth as a fictive world. And Tolkien's English, the old-fashioned, the beautiful words, and the sophisticated language he uses is really unique. And his narrative techniques, such as putting poetry and songs within the text, is something that really appeals to me as well. So what have I learned from doing this? Of course, reading the whole 3 books was for me kind of a lot to read, because I don't read a lot of fiction in English in general. So it improved my English in reading, and it has improved my way of thinking, how language connects. As language as a science connects with the impression you get when you read a book. And that's basically it. And my sources was, of course, the books and 2 sites about Tolkien and Wikipedia. Thank you.